How many of you think that you can build a rocket engine? 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe 5, probably less than 10 people. How many of you think that you could help build a rocket engine? A lot more, probably half the audience, which is great. You have 400 people here who could. So I want to speak to you today about why I think all of you can and why you might all consider doing so. You've probably all heard about the growth of the space industry in the last couple of years. You've heard about Elon Musk sending his cargo ships to the International Space Station. You've heard about Richard Branson and his space tourism company. And the Mars Rover is almost sending back daily photographs from life on Mars. But you may not have heard about how much the whole space industry has grown. And I wanted to talk to you today about that and why it's so important for humanity. In 2014, the space industry grew to $314 billion. That doesn't include any of the defense industry. And while most of this is telecommunications, these huge satellites, also right now there are hundreds of companies that are working on small nanosatellites, including, I heard that Lithuania sent up 2 last year. And in addition to that, there are at least 4 companies that are working on mining the moon, mining asteroids. And last year, we also sent up a 3D printer to the International Space Station. When you put all of this together, it means that we'll be on the space station, we'll be printing satellites and spacecraft and manufacturing additional space stations. We'll be sending robots to the moon and Mars to first go there and build all the infrastructure, perhaps using local materials that were mined. And then later, the humans will come there when it's all set up. If you've heard about what Craig Venter is doing, he's made it possible to email DNA code. So imagine you start growing wheat on the moon, and then you send an email with a new DNA code for carrots or corn, and a robot there does the manufacturing, and all of a sudden you have 50 different crops there. And then, the humans come afterwards. So the space industry is not just about exploring space, it's the future of our telecommunications. All of these satellites are part of the Internet of Things. And it's the future of manufacturing, it's the future of industry for humanity. And in addition to all of the new technologies that are discovered when you go into space. And as I learned about this, I started thinking about, who's going to own all of this? And is it going to be built in an open way that everyone can benefit from, or will it just be a few people? Right now, it's mainly a few wealthy countries that are driving this, and the world's billionaires. So, Richard Branson, Paul Allen, Jeff Bezos, the Google founders, Elon Musk, these were all of the billionaires that came out of the internet era that are now building the future space industry. And as I started thinking about this, I was wondering, how do we make sure that it's equal so that everyone can participate? I asked this question because my background's actually in the nonprofit sector. And I've been working there for about 20 years. This is a photo of me in Myanmar about 10 years ago, and I'm working in an orphanage. This was one of the nicer orphanages. I also went to an orphanage that was a parking garage with no natural light. The kids had nowhere to clean, they were dirty, and most surprisingly, they were so isolated from the rest of the world that they'd invented their own language. And, we often ask, why should we be spending money on exploring space when there's so many problems here on Earth? But what I found, being in the nonprofit sector for so many years, is that while we have to address these immediate problems, these problems go back 10, 20 years when people were left out of economies, when they were left out of industries, and when they were left out of jobs. And when I see how big the space industry is going to be for humanity, that is really happening right now, I want everybody to get into it and to help build it together so that we can all benefit from this. So I was thinking about these problems and what I knew, And I realized that what I'd learned in the nonprofit sector actually could apply to the space industry. The space industry is known as being extremely expensive. But in the nonprofit sector, we have to solve the biggest problems with almost no money or oftentimes, zero budget. And the space industry, because it comes out of the defense sector, it's very fragmented, it's siloed, there's not a lot of cooperation, it's very hierarchical. But in the nonprofit sector, all we do is collaborate. We share information, we're extremely open, we work together. And finally, in the space industry, we have the idea of the rocket scientist. And that person is almost like a superhuman god that's so smart. And we feel like, oh, I couldn't do that. You have to be born that way. But in the nonprofit sector, everything we do is based on empowering people and helping people and education and helping people know that they can develop whatever skills they need to make their lives better. I put all of this together and I launched a competition on the internet. I put up 3 prizes of $10,000 that I found from a sponsor and challenged the world to come together to build 3D printed rocket engines. And this was at a time when there were only 2 examples of 3D printed rocket engines on the internet. Now there's hundreds of thousands. But we had 80 teams sign up from around the world, from almost every continent. The youngest was a team of girls from the state of Georgia, teenage girls from the state of Georgia in the US. We also had university students and professional scientists, and even NASA got involved. And of those 80 teams, 10 submitted all of their final materials, which was their design files, a business case, because we didn't want somebody building something that would be too expensive to ever use. And also we had special criteria on collaboration, because that's one of the biggest problems in the space industry right now. So we had a special prize just for collaboration. And these are our results. So our first place team not only submitted their design for the rocket engine, but a whole nano rocket that could deliver nanosatellites. And it's interesting because in the US, like Lockheed Martin and Boeing will charge $12 to $14 million for this design stage, and they'll take 1 to 2 years to do this. And for prizes totaling $10,000, we incentivize this in 4 months. And yes, this is a prototype, so we would have a lot more to do. But it was an example of what you can do if you can bring people together. Our second place team was UC San Diego, and they collaborated with NASA. And this is the engine that they printed. And they printed the engine, and they hot fire tested it. And they said, okay, this actually works so well, we're going to build a bigger one. One of the stories that I remember about this is when this team started working with NASA, some of the other entrants asked, hey, they're cheating. And we said, no, they're actually winning because we're trying to get everyone to collaborate. And then this is the team that won our collaboration prize. And they took their design file for their rocket engine and they shared it with 7,000 people on Facebook. And every week they had a Google Hangout where they curated discussions to gather the input from other people. And to me, this was just an amazing, radical form of collaboration in the space industry that we didn't expect at all. And in addition to that, there were other forms of collaboration. The different teams would share information. So for the business case, one team said, here's the cost of rocket fuel, or here's an algorithm that will analyze your design. And then we invited judges from the space industry to make the final decisions and award the prize. So there's still a lot more to do with this, we need better tools for people to collaborate. We learned that while running the competition. And going from the design stage to actually testing and manufacturing is more expensive, so we have to figure out that process. As well as how do you work with a community through all of those different stages, and how do you incentivize everyone? But overall, I felt that we did a prototype that showed the potential for how we could build the space industry in the future. And I think back to when I worked in Myanmar and those orphans, and while the world that they were inhabiting was they were so limited in what they could do at that moment. When I think about what anyone with an internet connection could do now, maybe one of them will grow up to be building rocket engines. But more importantly, for me, I came from the nonprofit sector. My background's in history, and I jumped into a field that I was very passionate and always interested about my whole life, but I wasn't really supposed to be there or to do. But I learned that in this age where we can collaborate, where information is opening, like so much is possible. And I think probably each one of you has your own dream and something that you want to do, and maybe you feel like it's impossible or you have to learn more before you can do it. But in our world today, if you jump in and you start something tomorrow and you engage the community online, there will be probably hundreds of people that will jump in to help you and have that same passion. So thank you very much.